Hey everybody, this is Pastor Joshua Serrano.
And I'm Pastor Jeremy Serrano.
And Jeremy, what are we calling ourselves? I think we're calling ourselves Los Gemelos Güeros.
Right, the white twins. Right. And people should know that though we look white,
Right.
we grew up in a Hispanic community, and our whole family is Hispanic, and so we often use Spanish in our language, and that's often unexpected for people.
I was just telling somebody the other day that I'm pretty good at Spanglish.
Right.
My Spanglish is pretty on point. But my Spanish isn't fluent at all.
Right. I often tell people that my Spanish reception, being able to understand it, is pretty good. I can get about like 80% of what people say, but I feel like I'm talking like a preschooler.
Right.
Right.
Okay, so we're here.
We're starting this new podcast thing.
Right. This might be our only podcast, but we're just testing this thing out. Who knows what's going to happen.
Who are we to think we can start another podcast?
I know. Like the world needs another podcast.
What do you have to say that's so important that people are going to be listening to this on their drive or at their desk or whatever?
Honestly, it's I feel like it's just purely ego at this point.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So we're going to talk today about COVID-19, right? And
the coronavirus.
And we're also going to talk about how we got here, how we made the decisions that we made for our congregations.
Yep.
And so I think you should start by telling us just more about your congregation, your context, and then I'll tell mine, and then we can talk about it.
So I pastor Good Shepherd Lutheran Church in Concord, California, and that's a suburb outside of it's really on the East Bay, but for anybody not in the Bay Area, it's a suburb, a commuter town of San Francisco. Everybody from here goes into the city. Yeah. But we were also voted the 12th best place to retire in the United States. So we have a lot of older folk who live in the Concord community. Yeah. So that's kind of where we are. And my congregation, our worship is between 50 and 80 people on a Sunday morning, and really we can fluctuate by 30 people on just like a normal Sunday. So that's not like Mother's Day when there tends to be more people or any of those kind of holidays. I mean, one Sunday, a normal Sunday, 80 people. Another normal Sunday, 50 people.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's pretty much my context. Older folk in the congregation, a lot of people over 60. We have a few young families, and we're really trying to reach out to young families. That's one of the things. And what I'm really proud of in our congregation is this ministry we have, Friends Feeding Friends. Though we are a small church, 50 to 80 people, we do really, really big ministry. And so our Friends Feeding Friends ministry, we gave out something like 16,000 bags of food last year.
That's great.
We gave furnishings for over 3,500 homes. I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but we do really, really big ministry here. In fact, some of the big churches in our area come to us to serve because of the big ministry that we do. So that's kind of my context. What about you?
So I'm the solo pastor of a church in San Carlos, here in the Bay Area. It's on the peninsula side. It's about 30 minutes south of San Francisco.
Because in that Bay Area, we measure everything by minutes, right?
Right. We totally do. So 30 minutes south of San Francisco, about 15 minutes north of Stanford University. Our congregation, we worship on a given Sunday anywhere between 45 and 55 people. We tend to also have older folks in our congregation, but we actually have a lot of families in our church. and so there's a lot of kids in the church. Somebody was asking me, how many people are eligible for the Western States Youth Gathering? I'm like, I think we have about 15 kids that are able to go.
You have that many kids in your church?
Well, yeah, we do. But so we have probably like 120 members, but everybody, fluctuates on when they come. And so usually the typical worship is 45 to 55. But these are faithful people and so we also, we tend to attract families or people with young kids, which is a lot of fun, being such a small community. So that's my context.
So tomorrow's Sunday, right?
Yeah.
And we've both decided to shut down in-person worship for 2 weeks.
Yeah, and so how did you guys come to that?
Yeah, so we've been hearing about this virus for a while now, right? So I would say a couple of weeks ago, we changed some of the things we do in worship. And so the main thing that we changed is how we pass the peace. And we went to a no-touch passing of the peace. And we asked people to look at each other in the eyes and then just say, peace be with you, kind of as a genuine way for them to pass it with one another. And it was funny because on that Sunday that we started that, I had about a week before that talked to my men's Bible study about how in the Middle Ages they had what they called ocular reception of communion. And that was that when the priest would lift up the host, like they were saying that it's good enough that if you just look at the host and then you have ocularly received it with your eyes, right?
That's interesting.
And so it made my heart proud as a pastor because the guy came up to me and goes, this passing of the peace without touching, it kind of reminds me of like the ocular reception that you talked about. And in my heart just I was like, yes, they remembered something I said,
It's always nice when they remember something, right?
Right. And so this Sunday, tomorrow, we decided at our council meeting to make even more changes. We were going to do like a bow and curtsy thing for the passing of the peace. We decided to not have the greeters shake hands or hug or touch in any way. We were going to make sure that the ushers, when they're passing around the offering plate, were the only ones touching the offering plate because, germs go from hand to hand. We're going to keep the peace the same way. I was going to not offer wine because we do communion by intinction here. And that's not a very good way to keep the virus away from, we're trying to create that social distancing, right?
And what with intinction, a lot of people will dip their fingers in the wine,
right?
And that's really what we want to avoid with intinction,
right? Yeah. So people should be careful when they're doing intinction. Yeah. And so those were some of the changes that we made on Tuesday, and the whole council agreed that those changes were going to be good enough for this Sunday. And it was funny because we all kind of went home. And then on Thursday, after I watched this video by like the CDC investigator, he was on the Joe Rogan podcast, I decided that we needed to do more than that. And so I went and called every one of my council members, telling them I thought we should not have worship. And several of the council members said that they had done a bunch of research because we all kind of don't watch the news, but we were going to the CDC website, to our local health agency, the Contra Costa Health Department's website here, and really just looking at what the professionals were putting out there. And they were recommending, at least in Contra Costa County, was that no groups of 50 or more meet.
Wow. And
so we made the decision on Thursday that we weren't going to have worship for 2 weeks. In fact, we even went further than that, and we are not letting any groups meet in our space for the next 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how we came to the decision and what we did.
Yeah.
What about you?
So my church, I remember like a month ago, somebody came up to me before worship and said,
Pastor, I'm really concerned about this COVID-19 thing, and I feel like we should maybe not shake each other's hands in worship. And that was 4 weeks ago. This is before it was even on people's radar. And I was like, yeah, I heard that it's, coming to the United States, but I don't think we're there yet. So I just made an announcement, if you don't feel comfortable shaking anyone's hand, that's okay. We're not going to fault you for that. And there's hand sanitizer everywhere. And so I said, so we're just going to do it that way. And everyone agreed. And then a couple weeks later, it was like, oh, we shouldn't be shaking hands either, and so we stopped shaking hands. And actually, the funny way that we did that was, Anne, my wife, she wore kind of a cosplay and as Star Trek, and so she came up and did the Vulcan hand salute thing where you spread out your two fingers,
Right.
and say live long and prosper. So that's the way we passed the peace. We also did the same thing that you did, which was the ushers keep hold of the plates. We actually had small little communion cups as well as a common cup for either people to drink or intinct, and we just said whatever feels comfortable. So we did that, and that was actually last week. And then we canceled our midweek Lenten services because my thinking was the less we meet, the less likely we're going to spread this thing to each other,
Yeah.
right? If we have it,
Yep.
And so, but I wasn't ready to cancel. I wasn't ready to stop worship yet. And then, like you, I just started doing more reading, and I started calling people. I called the healthcare professionals in our congregation. One of them had a background in public health, and I just was like, you all have your ears to the ground about this. What do you think? And one of the last questions I asked them was, if you were to make the decision whether to pull the plug on worship or not, what would you do? And most of them said unequivocally, I'd pull the plug. And so that's when and part of the reading that I did, just going back a little bit, was the Episcopal Diocese in my area. They shut down worship for their diocese for the next 2 weeks.
I was told on Facebook that the whole LDS Church, the Latter-day Saints across the world, shut down.
Right.
Now their bishop, their pope, whatever you want, whatever that is.
I think they call them presidents.
Oh, their president. So their president had enough authority to shut down the church. Now that's a huge deal, and it's a huge deal for us,
Right.
not to have worship, especially being California people, right?
Right.
Because especially in the Bay Area, we don't really have events here that would shut down worship for us. We don't have snow
Right.
like the Midwest, right? We don't have tornadoes. We don't have. I mean, it's
We got earthquakes.
Right. I mean, California isn't heaven, but it's heaven adjacent, right? when it comes to weather.
Yeah, I know, for sure. For sure.
And so to shut down church is a big deal.
Yeah.
Because I want to talk theologically about this. Worship is the main thing that the Christian church does. Service is great, all of that kind of stuff, but the church is being church when it worships, right? I mean,
When we gather around Word and Sacrament, is that what you would?
when we gather around Word and Sacrament,
Yeah.
that's what makes the church unique in the world, because you can do service with thousands of organizations, but the church isn't unique in that respect. The church is unique in Word and Sacrament, and that's very Lutheran, right? Like in one of the articles of the Augsburg Confession, right? The definition of a church, like what is the church, is where the true gospel is preached and the sacraments are given.
Right.
Worship is the main thing.
Yeah.
And so to shut down the main thing, it really was a difficult decision to make.
and I gotta tell you, man, I was fretting too about it, because I think you're right. It is the main thing, and our congregation has been going through a lot lately, and so for me to make this decision, I was fretting about it, because
Well, I think we got to back up here, right? I mean, what we have to talk about, we can't just leave your congregation was going through some stuff because your congregation was going through some major stuff.
Yeah.
And so I think you got to tell just what you can, because there's still a court case going on, about what your congregation has gone through.
So in January, we received a total of 4 letters about that indicated that the person intended to commit gun violence in our congregation. They threatened mass shootings in our church on a Sunday morning, and we did eventually catch him. But
even then, you didn't shut down the church.
no, yeah, we didn't.
Like somebody had threatened to come and do something on a
Right.
specific Sunday, and you're like, no, I'm still going to lead worship.
Right, and in fact, some of my members who don't come often, they showed up that Sunday because it was like a big, it was like a big FU, right? It was like we are not going to be scared of this person, and so
Well, that's pretty darn cool.
Yes.
And I don't know, and I really respected how you were like, no, I'm not going to have somebody cover worship for me that day. I'm going to do it myself.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like if anybody is going to be there, it's going to be me.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? And I think that emboldened your congregation to continue worship and even come.
right. But there was a lot of decisions that I made. There was a lot of decisions
my council and I made,
To protect your congregation.
to protect my congregation, and so with this whole pandemic, it's like I'm still making emergency decisions. I'm still and Anne said it perfectly. She said, "You've spent a lot of your time making sure people are safe on Sunday mornings."
Right.
And
So you've been having to do this since the beginning of January,
Right.
Really protecting your congregation,
Right.
So you've been protecting them from gun violence, right? And I saw you post on Facebook, you cleaning the church with with
Lysol wipes.
Lysol wipes, So you're protecting your congregation in another way by cleaning it for them, and then now you're protecting it, the congregation. By closing the congregation for worship and all other events.
right, and part of us closing was because to care for the least of these.
a lot of the people who are immunocompromised or older, I think that if I held church, they would come anyway.
Oh, I guarantee you that if I had worship, I have people in my congregation who would rather catch the coronavirus than miss worship.
Right. That
know what I
real
mean?
sense of obligation, right?
Obligation and love for God
and the church,
and devotion and I need to help them.
Right, because by closing, you are freeing them of having to make that decision, right? But also, it feels kind of weird holding church just for the healthy, strong people.
And
asking the sick or the immune compromised to stay away.
No.
Like that feels weird to me.
Right.
And
So it's really a sacrifice. I'm not worried about the coronavirus. I'm young. I'm healthy. My family is young and healthy. If we get it, the likelihood of something happening to us is very small. Right. But if we get it, the likelihood of us giving it to somebody who's compromised in their immune system, that could happen easily. Right. So it's a sacrifice for all of us who are healthy and will survive this to say that we care enough about those in our community who are truly the least of these, and we're going to give up worship ourselves.
Right.
That's a real act of solidarity and love.
Yeah, yeah. No, I agree. I'm totally with you, man. I think it's a show of solidarity. I think it's a show of love, like you're saying, and I think that what we're doing here is well, we've been saying that we're canceling worship, but really we're not. We're moving online, and so I'm actually partnering with John Keener, Pastor John Keener over at Unity Lutheran in South San Francisco, and he is. We're going to be holding joint worship services online, and so I'm just directing all of my members to his website, that church's website, or they could call in.
And it's funny because when I heard you guys were doing that, I thought, well, I'm not going to remake the wheel here. I'm going to point my people, you are a fine preacher. John is a fine preacher. You guys do liturgy well. I'm going to be pointing my people to yours, and I'm going to be joining you all online.
And I wonder if that's not, there is some silver linings to this, right? It's forcing churches to work together more.
Yeah.
Right. I know that I'm going to be, that my council has been calling everybody to check in with them. And even though we are not meeting on Sunday, I feel like we are finding new ways to connect with people and different ways. We're not just letting the normal, the normal thing run its course, and so it's causing us to innovate, right? And to act differently, and that has real. I think that has real potential for good.
Agreed. When we first decided to shut down, I thought, all right, I'm gonna get 2 weeks off. Like I'm all excited, right? Like no worship for 2 weeks. All right, And then I started thinking, well, how can I replace all of those things that we're meeting with in person? And I thought, well, I've already been creating content for YouTube and what's the one the kids use now? TikTok. I've been creating some TikToks and stuff like that. And then I thought, oh, well, I'm going to need to create content and put it in places where my older folks can easily access it.
Yeah.
And I'm going to have to be calling them more because the connections that I made on Sunday morning, I'm not going to be able to make on Sunday morning. And so I'm going to have to make them throughout the week over phone and all that kind of stuff. And so that idea of like, oh, I'm going to get 2 weeks off quickly went away.
Dissipated.
Right. And I thought, oh, I'm actually going to be working a whole lot more these next 2 weeks.
Well, it's gonna change, right? And it seems to me like just the phone and email is gonna be essential because we can't go into nursing homes, we can't go into hospitals.
We shouldn't take communion to people because if we are infected, we're going to be giving it to people because you can have the coronavirus, COVID, is how you say it, COVID-19, and not show any symptoms, but still be passing it on to people.
Right. And
we could be passing it to each other right now and not even know
we have it. Right. Well, I think there's this old curse that I've heard of that says, "May you live in interesting times."
I'm good with that. I'm good with not having that.
I know what I mean? We are definitely living in interesting times. And
right, but let's not pretend this is unique.
Yeah.
Because
say more.
Because I think that sometimes we with the politics that are going on, with the wars that are happening, with even the sickness, the church, the Christian church has been through all of these things before. Right. We're not actually living in really any kind of new. It's not really new. There's always been innovations in technology. It's just different, right? And so the church has survived this, survived things like this in the past. It will survive this, and I think for me, what has been helpful was to really look at how the church and leaders in the church have done this in the past.
Yeah.
C.S. Lewis had a great article on how to survive during the atomic age. And I thought that was really good. I think you shared something of Martin Luther on what to do during the bubonic plague?
Yeah.
What to do during the bubonic plague. These are all, the church has walked this. Leaders in the church have walked this path, and we're walking it now.
Yeah.
And so I don't think it's helpful to be like it is interesting. There's no doubt about it. We are living in interesting times, but it's nothing really new.
Right. Yeah. No, I hear you, and I don't disagree with you at all. It does feel like it's the first time we have walked through this, right?
For sure.
We are, but I think that perspective is good to have, that this has happened before and it'll happen again, like Battlestar Galactica says.
Right. We couldn't get out of one podcast without Battlestar Galactica. Nice.
Well, maybe we'll do this again.
I hope so. And I recognize that our voices sound alike.
Right.
So I want to name that. Like people may not be, we may not be able to do this with each other without some kind of video because our voices sound too similar.
Right. Well, I know that I'm the better looking twin, so I feel like if it went to video, people would be drawn more towards me. I'm just going to say that. We don't have to.
But let's be honest, we did this on audio for a reason. Ain't nobody need to look at us. All right, I'm Pastor Jeremy Serrano.
Pastor Joshua Serrano.
Talk to you later. Bye.